In the years before the 1921 riots, Tulsa, Oklahoma was a little-known railroad town.
It was the railroad stop at the Arkansas River, because there was no bridge across the river then. So they came to the river and it stopped, and this was just the end of the line for a few years.
But Tulsa's fortunes would dramatically change when word of oil began to spread. A city built on oil money couldn't remain a secret.
Well, it just blew up. We had oil all around here. And many of the big oil companies were started here.
Tulsa picked up the nickname of Magic City, a boom town where people began to flood the streets in search of jobs and fortune. In 1910, Tulsa's population was 10,000. By 1920, the city had exploded to 100,000, 10,000 of which were African Americans. Many of the blacks in Tulsa were doctors, lawyers, businessmen, and educators. But because of segregation, they weren't allowed to work with the white mainstream population. So they created their own jobs and their own city within a city. Black Tulsans were forced to live on the other side of the Frisco Tracks. This section would be called Greenwood, founded by O.W. Gurley. Gurley was a wealthy black Arkansas landowner and entrepreneur who settled in Oklahoma in 1889. Gurley's Greenwood would become so prosperous, so fast, that it was called the Black Wall Street, perhaps the most successful African-American business district in the nation at that time.
Prior to integration, and that's when Tulsa's Wall Street was the Wall Street, we did have a lot of businesses, especially in the South. I've later found this out, that they were black businesses because blacks had no choice but to deal with each other.
These black Tulsans in this photograph ran their own businesses, restaurants, hotels, jewelry stores, clothing shops, taxi services, theaters, newspapers, and much more. They worked well, worshiped well. There were more churches in Black Greenwood than all of the rest of white Tulsa combined. And they lived well. Many of their homes rivaled those of wealthy whites in the area.
Oh, they were dressed. And they had beautiful homes, big pianos. They had curtains hanging from Belgium, furniture from Europe. They had it shipped over. This was black folks. Whites were jealous of all this. In fact, some were quoted as saying, these niggers have better things than we do.
The prosperous times in Tulsa, however, didn't go unnoticed by white authorities, because for all the praying the blacks did on Sunday morning, they also did plenty of partying on Saturday night.
We were just having a big time.
Otis Clark is 104 years old and still remembers well that though it was the Prohibition era and the entire nation was supposedly dry, it didn't take much to find alcohol in Tulsa.
We had that corn whiskey. We didn't have no whole lot of different fancy chickens and big whiskey like they got now.
Yeah.
We just had old corn whiskey, and we had to drink our corn whiskey and go to the show.
Oh, it's flowed. There's no question about it. But the bootleggers, they got kind of smart. They'd make you, there was some bad whiskey. I don't say bad, but I mean, some brands that were cheap. And the liquor stores would make them buy this cheap brand along with the other liquor.
Illegal drugs were plentiful too. Cocaine, morphine, and opium were the drugs of choice, but prostitution was the pleasure of choice. In 1921, an undercover agent spent 5 days in Tulsa and concluded,
vice conditions in this city are extremely bad. Gambling, bootlegging, and prostitution are very much in evidence. At the leading hotels and rooming houses, the bellhops and porters are pimping for women and also selling booze. These prostitutes and pimps solicit without any fear of the police.
Adding fuel to the flames, the prostitutes were mostly white women. The pimps were mostly black men. One former judge stated,
we've got to kick out the Negro pimps if we want to stop this vice.
Typical, the intermingling, and people knew it, but they didn't like it.
Having relations with a white woman was enough to get a black man hanged. But for some, apparently, the racial harmony was worth the risk. A reporter for the Tulsa Tribune found a roadhouse outside of Tulsa where he wrote these words.
Whites and Negroes were singing and dancing together. Young white girls were dancing while Negroes played the piano.
Working-class whites didn't like seeing or hearing this news. Add to that, the oil and manufacturing jobs were beginning to wane, and whites were getting laid off. The animosity towards blacks was building, and Tulsa was on the verge of its darkest hour.